So the body is constantly, if you say your body is like an operating system, it's constantly sending you emails that look at me, there is something problem. The brain is just like the virus of God.
Yeah, there's no plan. We're just going to go all over the place. We're going to follow our curiosity.
That's exactly what I tell my clients and my students. Just follow your curiosity and your breath, and you'll be fine.
I love it. On that note, so I have your LinkedIn profile open, actually. Let's tell the audience your version of who you are, what you do, and then we'll go to the backstory a little bit to figure out how you arrived at where you are today. So let's start with, who is Anchal and what does she do?
Well, I am Anchal. I'm a certified somatic sexologist. I'm also a child and family counselor and an art-based therapist. And in terms of my work as a somatic sexologist, I teach people how to be in their bodies and how to have better sex. But most importantly, I support people to have more choice and more freedom around their sexuality. And I address any, if they have any sexual roadblocks, we address them along the way, but in a very embodied way, because all your roadblocks are actually in your fascia or in your nervous system that are there. And I just help people to shake hands with them, and so that they can actually release them and have a more healthier, fulfilled sex life, whether partnered or solo.
So wait, so do you have to go to school for something like this? Because you said certified and it says on your profile.
Yeah.
And you studied this in Australia or something. So
I did.
Why is it called somatic? Do you want to tell us?
Well,
I know nothing. I'm just like this dumb idiot guy who's just like, what the hell's going on here?
So somatic sexology is actually, it brings together the study of soma, which is body-based awareness, or mindful practices, with sexology, which is the study of human sexuality. So as a somatic sexologist, we are trained in physiology, we are trained in nervous system, we are trained in the anatomy of their body, and also we are trained in various touch practices and to understand how arousal happens in the body, to facilitate somatic practices so that people can understand how arousal happens in their body.
So I think you talked about three sort of different themes. One is that you do you're a family counselor. Then there's something called art-based therapy. And then somatic sexologist.
But Could
you tell us all about what those three mean and how they sort of come together or not come together? What's the background for all three?
Yeah. Well, art-based therapy is basically art therapy. And being from College of Arts, because I graduated in graphics, and I wanted to actually in conventional psychology or in counseling or psychotherapy, it's a talk-based therapy module where you use talk-based interventions to overcome any deadlocks. Yeah, cognitive behavioral therapy, but it's all talk-based. I wanted to learn art-based therapy because I wanted to work on how do you resolve psychological deadlocks using art as a modality. And I actually worked with children with cancer as a research project. And, cancer is a cell gone rogue. So you can't really do much except do chemo with it. However, using art-based interventions, it could be music, it could be movement, it could be literally physical expression using colors, using paints, using any form of clay modalities to express your feeling. Again, it's a somatic way because it's working with the body through these interventions to resolve whatever is unresolved, unintegrated, unexpressed in your body. And we used art as tools to express those unexpressed unintegrated emotions. What happened, the result of that action research was that there was a 30% improvement in the symptoms. So the symptoms of cancer is uh, loss of appetite. It's sense of self-efficacy. How do you deal, because there is loss of hair, and especially I did it with a very small population. It was 20 children in a home away from home in Delhi, where most of these children were from marginal societies, and the parents had they sold off their properties and they came because they wanted to get their children admitted and taken care of, treated. So it was an NGO, home away from home, a palliative care treatment home. And what I realized at that point was children have fantastic coping mechanisms, better than adults. They don't need us to tell how they need to cope, how they need to heal, because their body itself, they have more agency over their bodies than us as adults. So if a young child, 9-year-old, he came from a chemo session, and I used to ask him, would you like to jump? He never said, oh my God, I've got pain. He's like, how high? And that really inspired me, because the level of resilience in children is amazing. You're offering them a different way of coping. So if their coping mechanism to deal with the difficulty of chemo is throwing a tantrum or being angry because they cannot express themselves, you're just saying, hey, can we do some music? Can we channelize your anger, which is valid? I'm not trying to reduce or censor your anger. I'm just trying to give it another expression, give you another tool for you to express it in a way that may be enjoyable to you. So it was literally like, if you've come to me, I offer you a glass of water. It's completely up to you to take it or not. And that was the role of art-based therapy.
Whoa. Okay, so we're going to circle back on this, and I want to dive deeper into this specific topic. But do you also want to tell us a little bit about, so I think the family counselor seems very obvious, but I don't want to make presumptions of what that entails from your perspective. So do you want to tell us a little bit about what that captures?
See, so in order to study art-based therapy, I had to get a certification in psychology. So it was just for me to tick off that degree, was to have access so that I could mix my art-based education, my degree of being a graphic designer or a communication designer, a degree in the arts, and have, because I wouldn't be allowed to go and get a credit in art-based therapy if I didn't have a psychology background. So while working, I kind of, just to get my credits and my notes, I kind of did a part-time course in family and child psychology so that I could tick off the degree. I don't practice it. I use tools. I don't use any talk-based approaches in my regular counseling sessions, in my regular session, somatic session, because it's more body-based work. But it's a great understanding about the neuroscience, about how the brain functions and how ramshackled our brains are in terms of we have a reptilian brain, we have a mammalian brain, and then we have something which is developed. And our brain is like 500 million years old. Who would have thought? They're so primitive. And actually the sexual aspect is that old. It's 500 million years old. So if you want to counter your fight, flight, or fight, flight, or fawn responses, it's hard. We are really hardwired into our primitive minds. So,
holy shit. Okay, so we're gonna do a deep dive into some of these, because what I want to try and do is just have this sort of broad understanding first, and for the audience of what to expect and
Hmm.
what kind of topics we're going to be covering and talking about.
I
So,
like the somatic sexology aspect because, okay, why don't you ask me and then I'll ask?
okay. So I think what I would want to do now is, now that we sort of have a sort of an overview and background into who you are and sort of what are the big themes that you cover and you have a background in. But that's not the full story. I think your career and your path was so different because we went to the same college, arts college in Chandigarh, India.
Yeah.
Tell the audience, including me, because even I don't know, you were in arts and you started practicing and you were working with some agencies. Tell us a little bit about where you were then and how did you go from doing that, practicing in an agency, to now, how did that transition happen? What triggered it?
Oh, okay.
Um, what got you into this? Like, how did
Somatic
you pivot?
sexology.
Yeah, how did you pivot?
Um, well, I kind of had a very conventional approach. In a way, I don't find it when people look at my experience or my journey, it's not very linear, it's very lateral. But for me, it's very natural way that I have kind of unfolded or grown in my life. Um, so, God, we went to college when in 2004 or 5 I graduated. I think you graduated in 2004. Ancient, yeah. Uh,
Let's not date ourselves.
So I I think for my first 15 years of my life, I was dedicated to media, where I was an art director and I used to work in different media houses, do photo shoots, events, design expos, and everything was great up till the point I started entering the dating world, and I just realized I knew nothing, absolutely nothing about my body. I always, and when I think it was 2014, which is 9 years ago, my interest in sexuality um, actually happened out of anguish. I was fed up. I was fed up with the way I looked at sex through a lens of performance. I looked at sex through a lens of my gender, that I'm supposed to make my partner happy. I have to bend backwards and make sure that he's always pleased. But I had no idea about what my body needed, how to even touch myself. And I was just sick. I was just completely fed up with giving somebody else the responsibility of my pleasure, and just deeply dissatisfied in relationships. And I realized this had to stop. So then when that relationship kind of ended its course, I enrolled myself in a self-paced sexuality course in California by Leila Martin. And I started understanding about my anatomy of arousal. What does it mean? What is this thing in my body? What is a vulva? And up till then, even my knowledge about addressing my body, my vulva was, yeah, it's a vagina. I didn't even have an anatomical knowledge about the functioning. And I remember the first exercise that we had to do was just touch yourself and feel. What do you feel? I was completely numb. I felt no sensation because there was just so much of, there wasn't a body mind connection. There was so much of disassociation between my body and my vulva that I questioned whether would I ever be able to feel pleasure. But, the good thing about my course was that it had a lot of somatic practices like breath, movement, placement of attention, but it also had information related to the esoteric practices of Tantra, Tao, a bit of shamanism. And that is my curiosity to understand my body, not only from an anatomical point of view, from a physiological point of view, but also from an energetic point of view. It kind of lured me further to explore. And I think from the training that I did, the self-placed training course that I did with Layla Martin, I went and did an ISTA, which is the Institute of Sacred, I think it's Institute of Sacred Temple Arts, which is completely based on New Age neuroscience, but also age-old principles of understanding your energetic body. Because for me, sex was a way to connect with my spirit and to feel unified. Because, growing up, the information that I got around sex was, you need someone to complete you, whether it's a partner. And sex, if it's not harder, faster, better, stronger, it's not sex. And it's so performative in terms of, can you orgasm on cue? Can you squirt? You have to be hard always for your partner. All these information just made it so tiring to always be ready and prepared, even when my body felt it or not. And it was also about, I kept on crossing my boundaries to please somebody else. But when I did this course and I completely shifted my focus, not on external factors, but I took the responsibility and became agency of my own body, my own pleasure. There was a paradigm shift in terms of how I started behaving. I was regulated. I was relaxed. I was extremely satisfied, open. It's like when an animal, which is an animal body, is well fed, they won't keep on hunting. They will just be more regulated and, I think, more receptive. And initially, what happened with that, I think, with that shift is it kind of had a effect on my external environment as well. Suddenly, the kind of men that I was attracted started changing. There were many men coming from all directions, like, Anchal, what can we do for you? Anchal, what can we do for you? And that used to be me. I used to be the giver in a relationship. And this time it shifted. And at that point, I couldn't realize how shifting my embodied belief around myself and my sexuality had such a external impact on my environment. So that was the benefit of this. And then my interest in sexuality and the practices grew even further. And I went to do this Institute of Sacred Temple Arts, ISTA. It's called ISTA Level 1 and 2. The trainings there. And I was extremely curious to understand sexuality from the perspective of sacred energy exchange, because sex can happen without even touching another human being. And that's what I realized in those practices of how sensitive we are as human beings, what our energy fields are, and tuning ourselves into being more mindful about ourselves, because I am unified. I'm complete as I am. I don't need to have sex with another person to feel complete. So when you shift that mindset and you have the ability to access all the pleasure within your body, within your 5-foot body, regardless of the shape, size, color, sex, religion you are, there is so much of choice and freedom in how you want to be. Because if I don't want anything from you and I'm just extremely self-actualized, self-expressed, loved, I will only meet you with that kind of life state. And I will share that life state with you. And also the thing is, when at the base, we all want to love and be loved, to understand and be understood. But if I'm fully satisfied and loved and I understand myself, I will have the same receptivity for everyone else around me. And that's a fact.
There's so much to unpack here. I am blown away, but I'm going to quickly summarize a few things if I want to make sure that because my stupid brain has understood some of this stuff. And you tell me if I've got this right. So I think I'll start in reverse. I think the last thing that you talked about is almost like saying, your intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation and sort of being grounded in your own reality and not looking for that external validation because you're sort of driven from within because you've, like you said, you've self-actualized, you're sort of centered, you're grounded, and you're in alignment and there's self-awareness. I think that's broadly what you touched on as the last piece. I think this explains a lot of the girls with daddy issues or boys with mommy issues. Anyways, okay. So, and then the other thing, I think if I was to sort of step out of this whole thing for a second and think about, and I think for the audience listening especially, now I know that you've traveled quite a bit and I'm not sure exactly, when you were going through this whole journey of, doing this course, and by the way, for the audience listening, I'll put the link in the show notes, is that when you were going through this journey, where were you based at that time? And how did your family and friends feel, or did you share this with them? Because I know that this topic is very taboo and, Indian parents rarely have that birds and the bees talk. And to be honest, this is the first time I'm having the birds and the bees talk, and it's actually coming from an expert. So I'm actually very lucky. But for most people, they're not going to get this chance. And, some people go their whole life never having even heard about any of this or experienced any of this. And they have this half-ass or negative experience their whole life, and it's all just traumatic. I know I'm saying a lot, but where I'm going with this is, if I was to sort of simplify, is number one, so at the time when you were going through this learning phase, or when you were getting exposed to this course and you were learning about all these different elements, is this a conversation that you were having with friends and family? And if not, how did your parents or people around you react to some of this stuff? I'd be really curious because of cultural norms and because you're also, a woman, and there's just so much unsaid.
Yes.
Read between the lines. You could call it nonsense. You could call it pressure. You could call whatever bucket we want to put that in.
Yeah.
And of course, I haven't had that lived experience because being a guy, it's a whole another chapter. I think we'll explore that later a little bit later in the conversation when we go deeper into, role specific, gender specific, maybe some of those elements. I don't know. But I would be really curious to learn about how that experience was for you to go through it, and then at some point start talk, because there was some point of convergence where you started to publicly talk about these things.
True.
So I'd really want for you to talk about it, and also that would give the audience, especially for the women and I guess the men as well, something relatable in terms of, because they're probably struggling with, how do I have this conversation even with my partner? Forget alone parents or friends and family, they could be struggling with. So that would be great to learn from you of your journey and during that specific phase, how you sort of overcame some of those hurdles and objections and negative feedback, I could call it. Yeah, just again, just more curious about what that emotional state for you was at that point.
Takes me back. Well, I started my self this exploration in 2014. And I think for 6 months up to 1 year, I was in silos. Because up till then, I used to be that woman who amongst friends used to keep quiet when they used to talk about sex, self-pleasure, having an orgasm, because I had no experience whatsoever with that. So I prefer to be quiet up till when I started taking responsibility of educating myself about my own sexual health and taking my power back about reclaiming and restoring my sexual health and having more sexual freedom and more responsibility. So I think for a good 1 year, I was just practicing very privately on myself, of course, embodying, because it's learning by doing. That's how you create neuroplasticity. That's how you create new behavior, is by repetition, and you learn by experiencing. It's an embodied learning. And I don't think I had a conversation with my parents, though I did have a conversation with my sister-in-law, who I am very close to. And she had asked me, oh, so you're actually learning how to masturbate. And at that point of time, I was like, oh gosh, there's so much of reductive thinking about what sexual health is and what sexual, I was actually disappointed in terms of how people perceived sexual health or sex education as through just by understanding ejaculation and orgasm. It is so much more. And that is when I started, there has to be a better way to learn and to teach, because I started slowly speaking to friends after, I think, 2 years, how I actually went and because I had a lot of experience and I had a training I had a lot of experience based on my own body, because I know if I could do it, I can help other people do it too. I can help my friends do it too. And I started working in a veiled way as a sexuality coach with women who had issues regarding painful sex, numbness, or an orgasmia, inability to orgasm. It was similar to what my conditions were. So through my own direct experience, I could share. I could coach them that, these practices help. Why don't you try them? Because they helped me as well. And I could see some sort of breakthroughs in their life. And that motivated me that, okay, now I think I'm extremely interested in pursuing this further as an education modality. And soon, lockdown happened, and I had done my ISTA level 1 training, in which I learned about the energetic aspects of sexuality. And I met my teacher, who was Elaine Young. She's a somatic sexologist and or a sexological body worker. And there was a session about understanding the body through a training. But however, lockdown happened then, and I couldn't go for that training, which happens in Australia. So what I started doing then was I started having safer sex conversations, and it was global. I started because I have a counseling background, so I started offering emotional support to intimacy and sex festivals, which were online across the world, where if somebody was having a breakdown, if somebody was having some sort of emotional issues, we were all trauma informed and we could help them. But essentially we were just holding space for them to express what they were feeling in their bodies during these conferences. And when lockdown finally opened up, that's when I had a conversation. Up till then, I was in Bombay. And then when I came back home to Delhi, that's when I really sat my parents down and said, this is what I want to do. Also, after lockdown, I was in a sabbatical for 2 years where I was just recovering from my work life, my imbalanced work life situation, and the toxicity around being a art director, working long hours, um, having no understanding of, because there is so much of dissociation and disembodiment in that work. It's all brain, and you constantly are pushing your body to deliver, to do things, pushing other people to deliver and do things. It just took a lot of mental toll on my own body, and I had to take a 2-year break. And that's when I really prepared myself and said, and I consciously went and had conversation around people, with people, about what does sexuality mean to you? You know, how what does fulfillment mean to you? How do you want to live? And it's not about just being sexual. But in the end, I realized the only answer I was getting was everybody wants to have freedom and choice in their life, in any sphere. And why should sexuality be left out? It's not supposed to be dependent. How can you completely live with authority of your own body and pleasure and be self-regulated all the time? Use that self-regulated energy in other aspects of your life. And sexuality is personal. It's different. It could be what a healthy sex life is may look completely different to me than to you. To accepting those differences as well, accepting those unmet needs as well, and looking at it as a lens of how can it make you more wholesome as a human being, rather than we utilizing manipulation, seduction, and distorted perception to get something. Because it's always, even the information that I see about sex it's so aspirational, but I wanted to dilute that conversation. Sex is not aspirational. It's like breath. Pleasure is readily available to you as a human being, even sitting in this chair. And I'm not talking about just sexual pleasure that people only think pleasure is localized in their genitalia. And I wanted to open up more conversation regarding the same, because you are not your brain. You are your nervous system, and your nervous system is all over the arms, the legs. Wherever you have nerves, you have the capacity to feel pleasure. You have the capacity to regulate yourself. You have the capacity to feel satisfied in your body through your felt senses. And that is what people had tuned themselves out of feeling. They had suppressed those, or disassociated themselves from their felt sense to a degree that they were only mental. And it happens because of cultural conditioning. It happens because of censoring. When we are children, we're just told to shut ourselves down constantly. When we become adults, we are also told ourselves to shut down consistently, like constantly. This is the barrage of information. Don't be yourself. Be someone else. That's what the information is. And so the body is constantly, if you say your body is like an operating system, it's constantly sending you emails that look at me, there is something problem. The brain is just like the virus of God. My job is to link the wire between the two and say, boss, there's an SOS. There is an SOS that you have to look at the whole operating system rather than just look at the brain. So that was the whole thing. That was that understanding of what pleasure really means to you. It's not localized just in your genitals, and it's not reductive in that sense. It's all over. You have the ability to feel deeply satisfied in your humane body, wherever you are, in whatever capacity you have. And I think with that understanding, there is there is no other word for that's coming into mind except saying sovereignty.
There's definitely a lot to unpack.
I
But
know. I need to slow
mine,
down. I think I'm
no,
upregulated.
no. I think this is fantastic. There's, I'm learning so much, and I'm surprised that I'm like can touch 40 some point. I'm very close to that age, and never looked. Actually, what comes up to my mind is, and this is a conversation I've had with multiple people in context to some other issues and things, but the philosophically, the thinking here is, as a kid, you're born, you're in society. First, you're sort of in your home family unit. Then there's like the extended family. Then you go into society, go into school, and all that stuff. And we spend so much time and energy and put so much emphasis and scores and medals on learning about everything external, whether that's learning about science, mathematics, blah blah blah, to but there's very little effort made to learn about our brain, our body, our conscious, subconscious, and a couple of years ago, about 4 or 5 years ago, I got into these books on like called the biology of belief, and learning about. There's these couple of doctors, Dr. Bruce Lipton, and there's a couple of books, and they talk about things like when kids till the age of 7 are in like a theta brainwave state where they absorb the environment. For them, they're unable to distinguish between reality and their imagination. So when they're playing in the sandbox and imagining a sand castle, that's a real castle to them. And at some point, adults forget that. And after the I did investigate, and because I'm just so curious about learning about just our own internal, like you said, internal operating system, and what triggers what, and how the subconscious works. And most of our life is just subconscious based on,
Yeah.
so first part is that that there's so much effort on the external versus the internal. And I think culturally, I also noticed that because I've lived in India for like 20 years and now I live in Canada, for example, like a simple thing like mental health. In India, if you brought up the idea of mental health at work, nobody would give a shit. And this is sort of parlays into what you were saying about toxic work culture. I mean, you do have that here. I'm not saying North America is immune to toxic work culture, but having worked in India and having worked now living here and working here, there's a huge difference. And just like when we say you have a headache, you have a broken leg, you're like, yeah, I'm gonna go see a doctor. But when it comes to something related to mental health, or the subset where it's related to your sexuality,
Reality.
there's so much taboo around these natural body needs and functions.
Yeah.
Anyway, so this is sort of what came to my mind as you were describing some of these different elements, situations, context, scenarios. And of course, I want to do a slightly more deeper dive into some of these topics.
But I'm curious to know what was the information regarding sex that you were given as a child, and what was your beliefs around that growing up?
Nothing. I think the growing up as a guy, I think there was a point at which the boys just got together. Then this is how I kind of got introduced to it. And we're like, we heard of like this thing called like a blue movie or something. And we're like, okay, let's go to the video store. And it was basically all it was just porn. At no point amongst even my friends or us, we ever actually talked about, how's your, we didn't touch on any of this ever. Like I haven't, never, I can think back, and at best it would be about what did you see in a porn movie,
Yeah.
and how much of that have you tried in real life?
Yeah.
That's pretty much it.
And I'm just curious to know,
So shallow.
so the education of sex with respect to which is natural, because most of sex education that we received as children was from porn, which is terrible. But how it kind of translated in our real life, that's where the disconnect really happens. And I'm curious to know what was mostly it's disappointing if the experience that you had. What were if you could go back and see what were the distinct differences that you could actually feel that, gosh, I wish I knew this. I wish somebody had told me this. Coming from real life experience.
That's actually a really good question, and it's something I should actually think a little bit more deeply about now that you've told me given me all this more context and tools just by some of the stuff that you've told me. But let me give it a shot based on sort of on the fly kind of thinking, which is really not thought through. And that's the whole point of this conversation. We're not prepared, ladies and gentlemen. We're just freaking we're riffing. So if I think about it, well, early years, it was all just seeing porn. Obviously, the first phase was just, looking at static images, magazines, because we didn't have access to. At some point, we're like, video. Oh my God. But I also read a couple of books in which they describe the act. And I was as a kid really fond of reading. And I read like a lot of Goosebumps. Of course, those are not sexual books. But I'm just using that as an example to point out that I used to love reading. I used to love reading like Hardy Boys. Not Mills and Boots. But we used to make fun of girls who used to read Mills
that
and
was
Boots.
our erotica.
Exactly. And so, but one thing I do remember is that early on, I remember a massive distinction between what I would read in a book and how they would describe the whole, from soup to nuts. I'm using soup to nuts. How they would describe the whole experience from like seduction to foreplay, and how I would read it in a book, and then how I would see it in a magazine or a porn movie. So I was slightly aware, but not like in a very conscious, like self-aware, like the 40-year-old me versus obviously I don't even remember at what age I got exposed to. It's definitely at some point in school. But so what I do remember is that in my college days is probably when I first had some sort of a sexual encounter, and it was all over the place. It was horrible. I sucked. I had no idea what I was doing. And yeah, I think it seemed like, when you look at seals on the shore of an ocean, it just looked like two seals rubbing against each other. It was pretty bad. And I guess I was completely okay with that. I was like, you know what? I have no idea what the fuck I'm doing. And but slowly, because I was I was lucky that I was seeing a couple of people, one after the other. I learned a little bit about how do I make the other person's experience great. I think for guys, it's like, okay, you should take a shower. You should smell great. Basics, right?
What about asking for what you need? Because
holy smokes, that is such a wild topic. That's something I think I've started to do now.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I felt, because I would have saved myself so much of pain and misery and not gone through other ways, because sex is such a taboo. It's veiled, it's shamed. Desiring itself is not okay. How can you desire for touch? And in terms of cultural context. And And shame sits is in the seat of vulnerability. But if you kind of throw light on it, that's when shame becomes a tool for integrity. Because if you ask for what you want, not in a shadow, but in light, you are authentic and you live with more integrity and openness. So in shadow, I could be like a seductress and I could like manipulate and I could charm you, like what is that insect plant called in which it traps the insect?
Holy shit.
Pitcher plant. Yeah. So that's what we unconsciously get into the mold of, just being coy or using all these techniques to lure a prospective mate into our den so that we can get what we want. We can meet our needs. But if you do it, if instead of doing it in shadow, with good quality sex education, that's what I learned as a somatic sexologist. With good quality sex education, it actually learn the languaging around asking. First, noticing what I want, valuing what I want, and then learning the language, how to ask for it. That is what the languaging around sex education is. And that is what we missed growing up in schools. We would have never gone down the path of chasing people, being people pleasers, if we just knew this as the foundation of connection. Boundaries, consent, all these things, they matter. Yeah, that's a big one. I learned it later, much later in my life too. And that's what now I ensure everybody knows this.
I mean, it's 2023, and could you imagine that even today, like we're having this conversation now, and I mean, we're so far from, let's say, what an ideal state could look like, where there's, I mean, this, not just this topic alone, but my philosophical sort of ideal state is that, the amount of time we spend in learning mathematics, we should also expose ourselves to being more self-aware, understanding how our conscious brain, subconscious brain works, to having curiosity, questioning versus memorization. So philosophically, and then these themes, whether that is having empathy for others, what it means to be civil, to your own self-respect. But I think a lot of the topics, a lot of the elements that you just talked about are sort of just saying, how are you able to read and interpret the other person, how they're feeling? Like if you're touching them in a certain way or you're making an advance on them, can you read their breathing? Can you read their body language? And that has a lot to do with not only just understanding your own body and sort of where you're coming from, but before you even understand the other person. So it's like empathy, but in a physical context, in a way. I don't even know what the correct
before even
science...
you get into a touch practice, I mean, sorry to cut you in, but before even you get into the practice of touch, I would say have a conversation around your desires. What are you desiring? Right. Because desires are always in this moment. They're not for perpetuity. Always in this moment, you may be desiring something. And if it's coming up somatically in your body, noticing, slowing down through your breath to notice, because we don't have the resource to know what's happening in my own body because I've cut it out. I've been disassociated. I've kind of shut that wiring down where I can be in my own body, attune that, have a somatic, learn my somatic narrative. What is my body telling me in the moment? Do I even want to be physically intimate with this person or I don't? What are my body's boundaries? What does an embodied yes or no mean to me? And can I slow down, and rather than being on autopilot and a performative mode, can I just slow down and check in with my body, give space, allow the desire or whatever needs to arise in my body, listen to that narrative and say, hey, hang on, can we pause for a second? Because I may have, in these situations, I may have said yes to something, but now it's a no. Or I may have said no to something earlier, but now it's a yes. But before, what I'm suggesting is that before we go into a touch practice, we create a container between partners and say, what do you desire in this moment? And how can I give it to you? Because our education again was through movies. You're supposed to figure it out. You're supposed to be my mind reader. And we're like scratching our heads and chasing this unrealistic goal all our lives to say, hey, I'm supposed to make my partner feel great, but I have no idea how to do it because there is no communication. And I am supposed to figure it out all by myself by like different techniques. Because my partner does not believe in talking. So you need to sit the partner and say, hey, I'm not a mind reader. And I want us to connect in a really beautiful, meaningful way. So can we just take turns and say, what are you desiring in this moment? How do you want me to touch you? Or how do you want to touch me? And then, play a game like that. How do you want, it's a touch practice game that it's derived by Betty Martin, Wheel of Consent. It's one of the practices there. And I usually advise all the couples to do this. How do you want me to touch you for 3 minutes? And the person can just talk. I want to do this, I want to do that. And the partner would be like, they really have to feel within their bodies and say, is it a full body yes? It's not a mental yes. A full body means head, heart, and the gut. Is it a full body yes? Or is it a no? So if it's a no, then you say, hey, can you ask for something else? So you do not shut down their desires. You say, but in this moment, I'm not feeling like this. Because in this moment, when I'm saying a no means I'm saying yes to myself. So when I actually say yes to something to you, I will really mean it. And that is what honoring, asking for what you want, and also receiving a no means your partner is honoring themselves. They're saying yes to themselves in that situation. And that builds trust. That builds integrity. That builds authenticity. That builds deeper connection. So, yeah, it's a lot. It's just one step at a time. There's just so much of information and so much of practice required around this area of consent, and just constantly learn by practicing till we get good at it. Asking for what we want is literally a practice. You keep on asking, you keep on asking, you keep on practicing till you get good with it.
Okay, so what I was thinking is, just before we sort of go now into sort of because we've sort of covered this topic, I would say slightly broadly, which is great because we've covered we have like an umbrella, let's say now, and I would now want to go into those individual tentacles and explore those. But just before just before you and I do that, I was thinking, or maybe this could be just embedded in those individual sort of elements that we talk about is, now, of course, the first piece is, this whole if there's like a Venn diagram or there were these overlapping circles, I think one would be this whole piece around awareness, education, and then that's sort of where you have like that philosophical, where self-respect, empathy, where you sort of fit in. And then the other piece was sort of the actual act and performance itself. then there's this whole other element of like, how that is shaped by your childhood. And I think you touched on some of those topics as well. But one thing I would want to start off with, and it's a little bit controversial actually, is how women use sex versus how men use sex. And we could start with something very broad first, and then we can go into the deep end of the pool.
Considering you're a male body, maybe you can start with a male perspective, and I'll start with a female perspective, and then we can exchange notes.
I can just share my anecdotal sort of perspective, which is pretty, I would say, uninformed and uneducated, but I'm just sharing sort of a personal experience. And if I think about it, again, this is not prepared or anything, but I actually feel like I have zero sexual power in the relationship. Because when I think about the male and the female body, and maybe it's just because I'm only attracted to women, so one, I guess, is more from like, if I was to think about it, that first piece is more about, I think that I don't actually have any power in that dynamic. That would be number one. And then
so
number
why
two,
do you have sex? That's the question, right? Why do we have sex? What is our motivation to have sex? What is your motivation to have sex?
Again, very good question. I feel like this is like a free therapy session in addition to being a podcast. But okay, so hold on. I'm going to really sort of untangle this yarn here, which got like 100 tangles over here. But so one is, I feel like by default, women, this is my perspective. I'm not saying this is the end all be all and this is not fact. This is just anecdotal, my perspective. One is that women definitely have the power in the relationship when it comes to sex, and now how a guy navigates that, you could determine that this guy's a beta male versus an alpha guy, where women crave this guy, where this guy's begging women to date him. There's this whole topic that sort of sits somewhere connected to this as a satellite, and then I think for me, I am attracted to a very specific type of person. Now, even though if I might see somebody like physically attractive, but the moment I start talking to them, if I don't feel a connection, I'm not turned on at all by them. I can't even think of them. So that's something I definitely do have from the start, where if there's no like chemistry in terms of sense of humor, and I don't experience like working with this person to navigate having a conversation, going through that awkward phase. If I don't have that as part of the whole package, I don't feel any intimacy at all with the other person. So now I'm just thinking.
So it could be.
And I know
have this script running of. It's a psychological script. It's like the core erotic theme. So one could be intelligence, that unconsciously you get attracted to intelligent women who have a way of conversing, and
I think
it's selecting a mate it's how you select a mate.
Yeah, because in my lifespan, I haven't had one night stands at all, actually. All the physical relationships have been an extension of an actual relationship. Of course, they weren't like, we could argue now that, oh, Paul, you never put that on your Facebook that you're in a relationship. It wasn't like, but from my perspective, if I was like, if I had an emotional connection and I felt that this is someone I could have a great time with, then that could lead into a physical relationship as well. But I've never been in a physical relationship in the absence of the first part, for sure.
In the absence of a connect.
In the absence of if the girl's like not funny, or she doesn't find me funny, for example, and if she's not interesting to talk to. And then, of course, as part of that selection criteria, I think what you pointed out is I'm not only looking at intelligence, but I'm also looking at, how she conducts herself, how she takes care of herself. Is she sloppy, or is she like good hygiene kind of things? So maybe those are a little bit shallow, I guess. I don't know.
No. They're actually, just to interject. So there's prestige. If you consider yourself as a person of value here, you want to get attracted to someone you feel is worthy of you. So you unconsciously may select a mate which has a certain prestige or a power, because there is. So these kind of subtle values, they come into play, conditions that we may not be aware of, that if you consider yourself as an object of value, or that I want to be desired, and I see how you see yourself. If you see yourself as an object of value and irresistible and desirable, and only a certain person of prestige and power and intellect can have you, then you'll unconsciously select those mates. It's basically like a movie script which is running unconsciously when you pick a mate. And we may not be aware of it, but it's growing up with experiences. Could be what we pick on, what we personally experience. We have that. And the players keep on changing, but the script is always the same. The actors keep on changing. The mates keep on changing. Yeah. So it's basically selection.
Yeah, I think you touched on a really good point. I think I've thought about, not like in a way that we're talking now, but if I don't feel like I'm desired and I'm wanted, I'm not turned on at all then. Then I'm like, because if I don't feel that at all, then I will lose I'll just shut off. Then it's almost like I feel like this is my weakness and my strength at the same time. And it's not necessarily to do with women and relationships, but it's like I have this mentality of super passionate, like a Labrador dog, but I'm able to shut off like that. And that's why a lot of people find it difficult. Like, wait, what? He just completely shut off. So I'm able to let go. Like, it's like a strong opinions held loosely kind of thing mentality. I'm super passionate, but I'm at any point ready to walk away if I don't feel that there's I'm not receiving, if we're not putting in the effort equally. Like, I want you, but if you don't want me, then I don't want you.
Yeah. So in that case, the motivation is, or could be for an intimacy and sex, the need to be desired and wanted. And for women, it's the need to feel connected. Because it's not about having sex for pleasure. We want to feel something when we are with another human being. And I hope I'm not generalizing it for all vulva owners, but let me just speak about myself. It's about, because everyone has different motivations, but usually I can say in most of the cases that I've observed, and I won't generalize this like an umbrella statement, but from my observation, most vulva owners, they have sex because they want to feel desired as well, equally. And they want to feel connected, that they're wanted, they're needed. In this moment, they are, their pleasure is equal as much as their partner's pleasure, that the partner is also having a great time. It's not just about them. Because I was reading something that in order to be an extraordinary lover, how much pleasure you yourself can access in your own body is directly related to how much pleasure you can share with a partner.
Whoa. I want to know more about that. What is that?
Yeah.
How does that work?
That's called embodiment, buddy.
What the?
Sexual
This is
embodiment.
like unlocking some secret mode.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a nice segue into what I do.
So wait, hold
Educate
on a second.
people on
No,
how to have better sex, but with themselves, solo or partnered, but really it's an education.
yeah, no, but I think you should. Before we segue into that, I think because we started off with how the male versus female.
Oh
I mean,
yeah.
for the sake of this conversation, we're using male and female sort of as a catch-all.
Male
You know, for,
body, female body, penis owners, vulva owners.
yeah, don't freak out, folks. But is our reality and our perception of this and how we sort of feel about it. I don't even know if I've answered your question, the one that you sort of asked. Because I don't even know if I have the right scaffolding to build on top of. But having said what I said, I would love to know some of the female side of things, of how they see it, whether that's your personal experience or, like you said, anecdotally, the people that you've observed and had conversations with. So what is, I mean, of course, the first one that you touched on is that to be also desired.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think one element in my worldview, or just based on sort of my experiences, is that how she thinks and how she looks have to be in harmony for me. She, like, by taking care of herself, I mean, does she have an active lifestyle? Does she go for a run, long walks? Is she into working out? Or she, and in addition to that, is she curious? Does she like to learn stuff? Is she like got shit going on? Because I remember growing up, I was so allergic to all these girls who would just be like a leech onto a guy and just like sucked into, like they had nothing else going on, and they'd just be like, okay, have you eaten? Have you slept? Where are you going now? I'm like, oh my, I can't deal with that at all. So anyways, so I was just curious now what that maybe touch on it for a little, like a short hot minute, and then we segue into what you were going to talk about.
I'm still not sure how to answer this question because it's so personal to what the
So broad.
motivation would be.
Actually, you're right.
For
It is actually really broad. So maybe we'll come back to it once I learn more. Maybe I can rephrase and give you a higher resolution question at some point. But yeah, I think
if you ask me what motivations are, what like sex motivation are, people have sex to feel transcendent, to feel connection, to feel a sense of belonging, to have spiritual unions. There could be tons and millions of reasons why people have sex. And it just depends on your erotic blueprint, to be honest. What kind of connections do you really like? It's true.
I have a
But are
toxic
you
one.
more spiritual? Are you more physical? Are you more in deep sensation? And very personal. It can't be so generic, actually.
True. No, I have a really good one, by the way.
Yeah.
One toxic trait that, for reasons of why we want to have sex, is to conquer.
Power. Again. Yeah. No, it's true, but it is power.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe you can edit this out, but when, what is this called? I understand the power of a strap-on and the amount of energy it has. So it's
Yeah.
completely understood what conquering, empowering is, because that
Yeah.
energy is so heady. It kind of just runs through your body like electricity. But that's very valid, and that's a very important reason, because it is very powerful. It makes you feel and why it's powerful, because you're completely present in that moment, and presence is that tool that makes you feel empowered. Just undiluted presence with
Um,
yourself, with your body.
so I'm curious, and again, I have like more raw data and interpretation, but this is not interpretation. I'm just going to voice out what I'm thinking, and then we can sort of figure out what it actually means.
Mm.
And this could be just because like I said, I don't have the scientific framework around this. Is so in one case from the guy side, it's like, okay, look at how many girls I slept with, or it's like almost like you're conquering kind of mentality.
Okay.
And that could be with a girl too. Like, look at how many guys I slept with. But and then from a girl perspective, I've heard this because a couple of times I've had conversations around, and it's like, and specifically relationships I've been with, or just generally women I've talked to, they're like, like they get a high on the power of how they can make a man feel with their
Yeah,
looks.
yeah,
So there's
yeah,
like some sort of a power dynamic there as
yeah,
well.
yeah,
I don't know obviously what this sociological, scientific,
yeah.
subconscious play is here, but
Mhm.
sorry, I was just more curious about some of these, I wouldn't call them necessarily negative aspects of it,
Mhm.
but how these powers can be abused. Like in Spider-Man,
Yeah.
it's like,
With great power comes great
gr-
responsibility.
exactly. Yeah.
But that's why, because with great awareness comes choice. Choice follows awareness.
Right. Golden words. I think awareness and having conversation is,
Yeah. And with that, energy follows attention.
right.
So if choice follows awareness, and if I'm aware why I do things. So circling back to your earlier question about when vulva owners or female bodies have conversation, I can make a guy feel so great. What about flipping the conversation and say, what do you feel in your body? Because when we are born, at birth, we are assigned a gender. And there's some um, performative or roles that we unconsciously carry on. So a woman's role in the sexual in intimacy and sex, in this situation really becomes this as a giver. How much pleasure can I give? Because that is attached to my sense of self, my sense of efficacy, and my fulfillment as a woman. So that's the shadow. Also, could be a shadow where I just focus on giving, being a giver at the cost of my own boundaries. And I just make sure that I please my partner all the time without having any understanding or awareness of how do I please myself? How do I feel equally satisfied? Because most of the time they're like, no, he needs to feel great. And I get high off it. I get a really, great feeling when my partner feels great. It gives me a sense of a badge of, yeah, you're a woman. Well done. You've completed your task.
I think, okay. So one thing that you're talking about here is it's almost like your validation is coming extrinsic from how the other person is feeling
Yes,
versus how you are
exactly.
feeling.
Exactly. So
Oh,
the conversation is never really intrinsic. It's always pleasure is always seek external. For men, again, how did you feel in the body? Nobody asked you that question. Like, sure, you slept with 1,000 women, but what did you feel? What did you notice? Where was your placement of attention?
Right.
Did you slow down to actually feel what was happening in your body? Where was arousal? Was it just localized, or were you just mental that I want to just jerk off as soon as possible, or I want to make sure she comes, I want to make sure he comes? What was connection? What was meaning there? What was the languaging? What were the sensations you felt? Were there any beautiful visualization images around it?
Holy shit. So then, this is gonna sound really stupid, but then when like this pop culture, like this very loosely people use this, is girls with daddy issues. So what's like how did we arrive at that idea and concept, and what does that actually mean? Girls with
Because
daddy
it's
issues are like so loose and whatever. Like, what does that
it's
actually? Is there some
basically
method to the
unmet
madness?
need, no? If I'm meeting you from okay. If I am interacting with you from a space of not having my needs met and extrinsically looking at you for meeting my needs and not taking self-responsibility of meeting my own needs based on my experiences in my childhood, I'm just, giving you the responsibility of meeting my needs without actually taking the responsibility of it. That is what means having daddy issues is.
Right.
Similar for men, for mommy issues or whatever you may call it. It's actually taking self-responsibility. This is my life. I can no longer live how I used to live. I want to live a complete, fulfilled, wholesome life with integrity, with authenticity, and I want complete freedom. Have choice.
Right.
Reclaim my sense of pleasure. Restore that sovereignty inside my body.
Got it. Okay. So now, firstly, amazing. We have some method to the madness and some sort of frameworks to start thinking about these situations and contexts. And I wouldn't call them problems, but I would call them, what do we call them?
Somatic learnings.
That would be the outcome, or what we're doing.
Inquiries. So these are just inquiries.
Questions. These are
Yeah,
questions.
spade like questions.
Yeah. So now, okay, I think this would be a great time to sort of segue into sort of the next half of the conversation. I feel like since you've been, I think, practicing for some time, and then you mentioned that based on some of your observations and conversations. Now, firstly, what I would want to do is just start from like the sort of the basics of what are some of the more common challenges or questions do people come to you with, whether that's vulva owners or
penis owners, or could be anyone who doesn't identify as having sex, binary, non-binary.
Yeah.
But before I actually do that, I want to talk more about the somatic narrative. What
okay, please
somatic
do.
sexology is.
Sure.
So it's a relatively new field. It only started in 20 years ago, 2003, by Joseph Kramer, who actually started this, I think, in the 1980s when there was the AIDS epidemic. And he wanted to have safe containers for same-sex couples, usually men. And he started an body electric school. He himself was a masseuse, and he started teaching people erotic body work. And then it segued into sexological body work, where he mixed body-based modalities, mindful, which includes touch, but it's like bringing together the body-based practices with the science of human sexuality. And the whole idea is it's a container, it's an education modality that teaches you about your own body, your sexuality, your patterns of arousal. And it also gives you resources and tools through which you can resolve any any barriers, any sexual roadblocks or barriers that are in your body. And all this happens through embodied learning, which means the learning that I feel, that I experience in my felt senses. Because you can only learn by experiencing and repeating it. And with repetition, you create a new behavior so that you can drop those unhelpful embodied beliefs around your sexuality and your whole nervous system becomes more robust in that sense. More firing and wiring happens. And speaking to the question how sexological body work or somatic sexology helps you have a more regulated and more satisfied sex life, or just become a more regulated person. Because we work through the somatic tools of breath, placement of attention, movement, touch, and sound. And I think what somatic practices really do is they help you to slow down to notice. It starts with understanding what this 5-foot body is by slowing down, maybe slowing down your breathing to actually feel what's happening on your body. What are the sensations happening out there? Where do you feel cold? Where do you feel hot? Where do you feel vibrations? Where do you feel contracted? Where do you feel expansive? Because our fascia, all these felt senses, they store trauma, they store memory, they store our unconscious habits. Our brain, we don't function from our brain. We think brain and the spine is our central nervous system, but it's actually our peripheral nervous system. Our brain is actually in our body. It's through all our nerves that we are getting the information and how we are interacting with our environment all the time. So when as children, we are censored or we are told to dial ourselves down, our nervous system, or any traumatic incident that happens in our life, our nervous system takes stock and it gets stored in our fascia, in our tissues. Our mind may not remember, but our body always remembers. Our body always remembers it. Our body always keeps score. With breath as a somatic tool, when I start breathing and I go all the way down into my breath with slow rhythmic breath, this is a center of my sexuality, but it also is my emotional center. And I have to meet all those unexpressed, unintegrated aspects of myself. It could be palpitation. It could be some sort of vibration. It could be heat. It could be some contractions, any sort of thing which is happening internally and on the body, intrinsically, and by my felt senses. And usually it's linked to some somatic memory that shows up while touch happens, while placement of attention happens. And then we get into it of, okay, so unconsciously you are hardwired to look at pain in your body. I'm just giving an example. And you're hardwired to look, what is that thing? प्यार से डर लगता है, थप्पड़ से डर नहीं लगता. So we are hardwired to look for pain in our bodies rather than look for pleasant sensations. And this actually is an unconscious pattern which runs into our behavior, that we keep on meeting hands and looking for experiences that keep on imprinting the same imprinting the same experience. And that's how it keeps on getting stores, and we feel comfortable with it because it's known. And so one of the somatic, and that's how a somatic awareness could happen. With somatic experience, there's a somatic opening. And this opening happens through somatic practices. Yeah. So this is just like a tool. And the conditions, most of the conditions that people come to me is for vulva owners, it's painful sex. It's having issues, constrictions or additions in their vulva after childbirth. It's having no desires to have sex. It could be numbness, inability to have orgasms. It could be learning languaging around consent, around learning how to ask for what they want, because it's so difficult for them to even express their desire based on the cultural conditioning and agenda and the fear of being shamed, fear of even having desires, asking for what they want in the bedroom. So languaging around consent, boundaries, and or they could just be interested in understanding what this anatomy is and how can I have, I'm fed up of having my pleasure just being localized in my genitals, and I want to feel pleasure all over my body. They want to have more orgasmicity. They want to have more pleasure. They want to open up their, or have understanding of the mind-body connection. Yeah, stuff like that. And for
I
men,
think
sorry. And
sorry,
for
before you jump into men, just on that same topic, I know you described some, I would say, physical symptoms, let's say,
yeah,
and obviously there were some mental ones as well. But I think as part of that same message, if you could throw light on, I think you talked about this previously, is you were using the word script, so there's some scripts running our lives.
yeah, co-erotic
So
theme. Yeah.
so in these conversations, when you're sort of unpacking and learning about from going from their symptoms to the cause, are there some patterns or common scripts that you've noticed or observed that you could share? And the reason I'm saying that is,
Yeah.
for you as the expert, the solution. You can also might be aware of some of the causes, but for the people listening, I think the first thing is I think most people don't even know they have an issue, and they don't even know what to look for in terms of the symptoms. And unless someone is like, I need to address this and I want to, and then they go sort of on that investigative journey due to something that might have happened or out of their curiosity. But for people listening, who are sort of not even aware of this script or subconscious programming sort of running their life, what are telltale maybe signs or symptoms that creep up, or hopefully that makes
So,
sense.
yeah, well, the co-erotic script is basically why you attract who you attract. It's not related to the body-based practices that we are talking about. It's basically your attraction piece. So it would be like, what are the most common things that you notice at your peak arousal experiences? What were the things that were conquering, that kept on reoccurring? One needs to investigate that, because that is where, what did you notice? What were the distractions? How did you feel in your body? How it made you feel is the piece, because we live to feel something. And did you feel powerful? What was the quality in the person that you really like? And it's a reflective exercise that if somebody's interested, that, oh my God, I keep on attracting this sort of person in my life all the time, then I would
Yeah.
just go ask them to say, okay, write down all your peak erotic experiences and find out what made it so special and what was happening during it. And usually then out of those experiences, there's a script. There are some similar values that come out. Could be power, that you get attracted to people who have a certain power. So for example, and also in your fantasies. So what has been your peak erotic fantasies, and how do you visualize yourself? What are your recurring fantasies? That is also a indication of how you perceive yourself and what is the kind of mates that you unconsciously or consciously attract. So for example, if I say in my fantasies that I'm a tigress and I'm chained to a dungeon, and I want only people of power to touch me, that means I'm an exotic object of value, of extreme reverence. And unless you have the strength to tame me, I will bite your head off. You need to have that skill, the prestige and the power. Only then will you be allowed. Only then will I even give you the time and attention. So that's how I select a particular mate. And one needs to reflect what are their recurring fantasies and what has been in their peak erotic experiences, what has been that commonality. And then you draw upon your core erotic themes. So it's power, desire, prestige, could be anything. Usually these.
Right. And so is there some element of like, if this, or I don't know how to even think about this, is that, so let's say based on sort of the role that you described and that persona that you described, it's, if once those requirements are met, then I'll be submissive to this person. Is that correct?
No, I mean, the whole idea is that you own it, because the whole idea is about understanding your whole, and it's not, you're not dissing it, you're not judging it. You just want to understand what makes you attracted to another human being. It's not saying that you're in the wrong. It's just owning your desires and owning your selections, because I am unique. I feel this way. And if I am clear about why I select certain people. So for example, I can give you an example. When I did this, exercise for myself, I realized I was miserable because I kept on attracting people who had they were leaders in their field of work, but they had no time, and they had commitment issues. And I was writing down, like, why is it that I keep on attracting such mates that are successful, they are leaders in their capacities, but they just don't want to commit and they don't have time. And then I realized, because I consider myself as a value of prestige. I'm desirable. I'm valuable. It's like a Kohinoor or someone. It's like gold. And only very powerful, certain intellectual men who are extremely skilled and focused and driven can have me. But most of these people who are focused, highly driven, in leadership qualities, they don't have time. So I could actually realize that, oh yeah, so I'm unconsciously choosing them because it's feeding into my desire of I am valuable and only these men can have me. But I did not realize the flip side is that these men like these don't have time for me. So I could accept that in a way that, okay, so the next time I want to select, I don't want to dilute my selection process, but maybe I'll choose someone who has more time for me, who still will be a leader, who still will be accomplished, but he will have a more balanced life.
I've actually never thought about these things in this way. And this is why I really like having these kind of conversations, because I can improve my resolution of understanding and even having the framework to think about these things. Because I'm like, wow.
You can read The Erotic Mind by Jack Morin, because he's the founder of Somatic Sexology, and he writes about core erotic themes beautifully. That's my take on his book, but you should read it.
Right. So, by the way, towards the tail end, we will definitely take some recommendations from you for where people can get started and what books to read, what videos to watch, or what movies to see, whatever. And for the audience listening, I'll put all the links in the show notes, so you don't have to Google shit. You can just sit back and enjoy this conversation.
My LinkedIn profile.
Correct. Let me just check my notes, because I made a whole bunch of notes as well. Maybe I can pull something from there.
At least my
Uh,
first date, I made nothing. I thought I would be prepared, but
Look at that. This is what my view looks like, by the way. If you
wow.
can see it.
Yeah,
Those are,
good.
those are,
That gives me a reflection. Let me see if I want to say something.
by the way, that's
Ah,
just the first spread. I'm on the second spread already. But I also hear a lot of times where, and I think this is something that you can maybe elaborate on, is one is short-term fling sort of partners, how we look at those situations versus long-term. Because the comment or the idea that comes to mind is sometimes I'll find like girls in my personal life, and this is maybe just anecdotal. They're like, this guy I'm married to, I never thought I'd be in this kind of guy. But now I'm married to this, because she's like, the girl's like telling me, she's like, when I was dating, I was totally into this kind of person. But now that I'm in a relationship, I'm with a guy that I would never thought I would be into. That could be as simple as, I always probably wanted a certain race of person, or maybe a certain background, or certain intellect. Is there something there, or
So I'm not a relational, like I'm not a relational therapist. I'm a somatic sexologist. It's a difference.
fair enough?
But from my experience of it, you meet people where you are at and what your desires and needs are in that moment. And your desires and needs are momentary, seasonal, could be yearly, could be monthly, could be weekly. But you actually attract who you are in that moment. And what you were 10 years ago is, of course, not the same person you were. So when a person says, oh, I had never imagined, of course, because you're no longer the same person, you yourself have changed. So you need to take that into account too.
That's what comes up to mind is like, when you get into a relationship with someone, obviously you're meeting them at that point in your own journey.
Yeah.
And there are some people who sort of stay static. There's some people who want to grow every day. They want to learn something new. They are constantly progressing, working on themselves. And if that partner, I guess I'm just speaking of what my preference is. So if the person that I'm with is not progressing, learning, growing,
Yeah.
I'm probably so turned off just by that kind of like somebody who's just static. But for some, that's very appealing because it's predictable. They like that, and so. Okay, hold on. I just remembered something that you brought up very early, and we sort of glossed over it, but I think it'd be worth expanding on. You talked about the head, heart, and gut. Tell us a little bit more about how
Oh,
that
yeah.
sort of works in
Oh, yeah.
the
Okay.
grand scheme of things.
So every time you want to make a decision, you check in with your head, heart, and gut. And that also is your three centers: the mind, the heart, and the gut, or the sacral, which is the other head or the heart is your stomach. And when there's congruence, then it's an embodied or a full yes. It's a hell yes. Because there are a lot of things, Paul, every time you say yes to something when you meant no, your body will keep score. And then at some point or the other, it will kick your ass, especially related to boundaries. So it's very important to check in, am I in congruence, whether anybody wants anything from you? Can you give with a full yes? Can you give with a full heart? It's an embodied yes or an embodied no. Also, the somatically way to check whether it's an embodied yes or no is, okay, let's do an exercise. Can you just lean back, relax your shoulders, relax your spine, just breathe in, relax your jaw. And just take a deep breath from your nose and exhale with a sigh through your mouth. Let's take a deep breath. And I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, and all I want you to answer it I want you to answer yes, regardless of the question I ask you. Okay. And then just check what happens in your body, especially your chest, your stomach, and your throat. Okay. Just notice. Okay. Slow down. Just take a deep breath in from your nose and just relax your feel for your body, feel for your chest, feel for your spine, feel for your sit bones. Just feel the area behind, behind your chair. Okay. Relax your jaw. Slow down. Close your eyes. Just close your eyes. So, Paul, can we go out for ice cream?
Yes.
Slow down. Take a deep breath. Where is the yes coming from? Paul, can we go out for ice cream?
Yes.
Where is it coming from? What are you noticing in your body?
I feel like this is coming from my. By the way, I love ice cream. It's coming from. I feel like it's coming from my mind, but I
Yeah.
probably need a little bit more practice and just, get more zen
Okay,
with this. But
just put it, feel for your chest and feel for your tummy. Okay, I'm gonna ask you another question. Paul, do you want to go to Gary Root?
yes, that I feel like came somewhere from here.
Yeah, from the heart. And where do you feel? And yeah, just connect to the sensation. Is it did your chest just move slightly? Did you move towards me or did you lean back? Okay, I'm gonna ask you, and I'll keep on asking, keep on noticing in your tummy and in your chest now. Paul, can I borrow $2,000?
Mind. Yes. Oh, throat.
Yeah.
Fuck.
What?
I felt my
Yeah,
throat.
exactly.
Fuck.
Exactly. Okay.
What the fuck? Okay.
Exactly. Did you feel a contraction? Did you
Yeah.
feel like fuck your body was saying, Paul, what the fuck are you doing?
I
No.
fe-
Yeah.
I felt like tension in my
Yes. That's
neck
the
and throat.
somatic narrative that the OS, the email that your body is always saying, fuck, look at the OS, look at the operating system. It's not a yes from me. Why are you saying a yes? And we bypass this constantly every day, whether in intimacy, sex, or in any other way. And that's what the body, it takes stock of things. And that's what trauma happens because it remembers. The mind checks out, but the body remembers. And what an embodied yes or a no means, slow the hell down, notice, give space, notice what your body is telling you. And that is what an embodied yes or a no means. Because you will know when it's a no and you will know when it's a yes. Because a yes is more expansive, your chest is more open. There is more freedom in your chest, there is more relaxation. And usually in a no, you just find this knots and tightness, especially here. If there is an emotional blockage, it will just come up as a lump. And maybe your toes will constrict. There could be n number of somatic things happening on your body, but we have just like tuned ourselves out of, being aware of it. And when you have awareness, you have choice to make the right decision. You have choice.
Fuck. Yeah. Yeah. This reminded me of something. And this is like a couple of years ago, maybe like 3.5, 4 years ago. And it's happened once. So I remember it as like once in my lifetime. I've remembered as a very stark story. Is because now we have all this tech gadgets, health devices. So I wear like a Apple Watch, not a flex on like what watch I wear, but it reads your heart rate and it tells you, your resting heart rate, or if there's any sort of unique uh, event. And once, and so I remember this day, it was like a weekend, and I got an email from my boss. And when I checked that email, my heart rate spiked, and I got an alert from my watch, and it said that your heart rate just went, is everything okay? Like the watch will give you a prompt. And it directly correlated with, I was like, fuck. I'm like, this work thing is really stressing me out. I had no idea.
Exams.
If I wasn't wearing the watch, I wouldn't know.
Mm-hmm. That's the thing.
So I'm a little bit mind blown a little bit right now. um, so I remembered something else that you were talking about before a little bit, and I don't know. So what do I don't even know. And again, I know that we've been already chatting for 2 hours, and probably want to start closing off the conversation in the next few minutes. But
We can have another conversation sometime later.
yeah, I think we definitely need to have way more conversation, because I feel like we haven't even scratched the
Yeah.
surface.
Yeah, it's like a good
But
shake.
I know. I just like, my mind is blown. I'm just trying to like process all. I need to like sleep over this and like really. I'm just super fascinated by it. Anyways, but one question I did have before we start to sort of descent into landing and start landing this thing is, and this might seem a little bit silly also, but maybe there's like, I'm guessing there's going to be something here, which is, what do our sexual preferences say about our programming, our scripts, or who we are? Is there a thing there?
Well, sexuality is so diverse. It's
No,
all of
oh, sorry. Let me just sort of refine that question. I don't mean by like, I'm into women or I'm into men. Not that. I mean by like, I like
kink.
this thing in bed, or I like, I
Oh,
like
okay, fetish,
kinky
kink. Yeah,
fetishes, kinks. Yeah, I think that's the
yeah,
question, not sexual
yeah,
preference. So
yeah.
it's like,
I think.
what do they say about our script? Is there something there? Like, let's say somebody who's into like bondish or whatever versus somebody who's into like, I just like missionary. So is there like something there
Yeah.
in terms of your script or subconscious, or like why
No,
do certain people prefer certain things versus others? Is there something there, or?
it goes back to what motivates them. So if I do this to connect, and if I'm too much in my head, what kink and BDSM, because it just brings you immediately into your body. Because if somebody's has a rope against your body, you can't help but feel the rope on your skin, and you're no longer in your head but on your body. So these are just tools to bring you into your body, bring you into awareness, regardless of what types of acts you prefer. All of them have the same goal of bringing you back into your body, and there's no judgment in that. If they
Right.
bring you back if they bring you into presence, so that your attention and intention is to be present with what is in front of you, so that you can really feel it. That's the whole purpose of sex, is to feel connected and feel great.
Right. Right. Okay. Wow. Fantastic. So, and obviously this is sort of linked to like, you want to feel transcendence and,
Yeah,
how
it
it
could. The
makes you
motivation
feel.
could be endless: spiritual transcendent, connection, relaxation, regulation. Um, yeah, I can actually.
Yeah.
There is more information. Let me see. That
So
I have.
basically like jumping from your mind, getting out of your head and getting into your body, being in that
Right.
flow
Yeah.
state, and then
Yeah.
time passes by. It's like when you're
Yeah.
in your flow
Yeah.
state of writing something or doing
Exactly.
something that you love, like time flies, you're not
Exactly.
in your head, you're just in
Yeah.
that thing.
Exactly.
So maybe that's how, okay. Um, so now I think we can, I'm going to put some questions, which is going to help us sort of close off this conversation so we can pick it up again on another episode. And plus, I'll get a little bit more educated about all of these things and have some time to sit over and let them percolate, marinate in my brain. But where I would want to go here is, so now that you've sort of been practicing and have been talking to people, so one thing I would want to know towards the tail end is, if somebody was interested in this, how could they connect with you, reach out to you? What does that look like? So you can maybe talk about that towards the end. The other piece is for vulva owners or penis owners, or male, female, what would you advise on the first steps that they can start taking? What would be a great place to start? I think you did mention a book, but are there daily activities, rituals, simple things that people can start doing to kick this off for them?
Okay, I want to work on helping people understanding what their orgasmicity or their container is in terms of to feel. So imagine this is my container. Yeah, this is my container to feel pleasure. And this is my capacity. It could be capacity to love, capacity to receive. And I meet a partner whose capacity is this, right? Has a big capacity. And the partner can keep pouring all the love, attention, touch. But there's a difference between, the contained capacity between the two vessels.
Yeah.
I cannot grow bigger in the sense I cannot give my partner the responsibility to grow bigger because my capacity in this moment is only this. How I can become this is by taking the responsibility of increasing. And that could only happen by practice, learning. And from here to become this would be self-responsibility. This person is not responsible for increasing my capacity. I have to take responsibility of where I am. And that's where I usually tell my students and my clients, meet yourselves where you are at. And then incrementally, we go from there to whatever capacity you want to grow into. Because it's an education and everything is tied up to your learning objective. What is it that you want to learn? Where is it that you want to grow? And we grow there. We drop all dependencies on external factors that makes us chase, makes us please. And we just bring all that energy back into ourselves and focus there. That's the starting point. Meet yourself where you are. Meet yourself where you are at with a lot of love, a lot of kindness and patience. And use breath, slow breath.
Yeah, that was a really cool exercise, by the way, to just notice how certain things manifest in the body. Really cool. Okay, so that's I think part of any learning, learning something new. This is a new activity for a lot of people, is also be kind to yourself the whole way. Don't put pressure on yourself. if you're not getting results immediately. I think that would just be my little tiny addition.
Yeah. And drop the dependency on external factors. They're not responsible for your growth and pleasure. You are.
So more conversations to come. Hopefully Anchal will want to come back and talk more. And so while Anchal, you tell the audience about where they can connect with you and sort of your pitch. This is your elevator pitch moment.
Pitch?
And I have a very tiny 10-second activity that we can do. I have a book here. The activity here actually is 3001
Questions all about me. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So you're going to pick a number between
45.
0, 45. Wow, that was quick. Okay. Let's see here. Do I like to curl up with a good book? Question mark. Should I do it more often?
Can you repeat the question? Because
Okay, so
the
the
book
question
on
goes,
my bedside that I do curl up upon, I don't know if I can show it.
why not? So hold on. So the question is, let me
Yeah,
read the question first.
sure.
Do I like to curl up with a good book? Should I do
Yeah.
it more often?
If the good books looks like this, yeah.
Confidence. Holy shit. What book, what is it about? I'm curious.
Well, it's about
Never judge a book by its cover.
well, it's basically understanding what motivates men to in context of intimacy and sex. And it's a great book by Celeste and Daniel, who are somatic practitioners. So if you want to read this, it's great.
Okay. For the audience listening, I'll put the link to this book in the show notes.
Sure.
So for whoever wants to be interested, I think it would be bold for people to just have it on their coffee table. So when they have guests
No,
over,
it's in my bedroom. So no.
yeah. We're not there yet, but one day.
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. So your elevator pitch, and then any final words, and then we wrap up.
Well, if you're interested, I don't have an elevator pitch. I would just say, so one of my services is called integrated sexuality, because I genuinely wanted to integrate all parts of us that we have chopped up, physical, mental, spiritual, and sexual, because I look at sexuality in a very integrative way, which is integrating all aspects of ourselves. And the services I offer are of somatic sexology, where we, through somatic tools, understand what your patterns, if you're interested in knowing what your patterns of arousal are, and if you're interested in overcoming any sexual roadblocks or barriers in your 5-foot body, and just start with having deeper understanding of what pleasure and arousal is and means for you in your own body, you can get in touch with me. And I usually have a 15-minute free consultation call, and I can put a link below. It's in the Calendly link. You could, I have two social accounts. One is LinkedIn and one is Instagram. And you can get in touch with me via that. My website is work in progress. Yeah.
Amazing. So for the audience listening, I'll put the booking link, 15-minute free consultation link in the show notes for anybody interested. Let them know that Paul sent you. And also I'll put links to Anchal's LinkedIn profile and Instagram profile as well, so you can reach out to her. Any final words, final thoughts to leave the audience with?
Slow down and really feel and notice what's happening. Allow magic to happen.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. This was super fun. I definitely learned a lot, and I have a lot to think about, a lot to unpack. It's going to take a couple of days for my brain to process all of it. But I'm really glad that we had this chat. I really appreciate it that you came on. And I'm looking forward to our next chat.
Right. Yeah, it was a great muscle workout for me, my first podcast. So at least I embraced my clunkiness. And that is what I usually tell my students as well, like, don't chase perfection. There is nothing called perfection. And the whole exercise is, if there was ums and ahs, and sometimes I froze or I was in a free state, all is welcome. That's who we are.
All right, folks. And all right, Anchal. We'll see you in the next one.